The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wider than any stadium on Earth. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the massive space, their voices creating a sound like ocean waves crashing against stone. Some stood on legs, others floated in specialized atmosphere bubbles, and a few existed as pure energy contained in crystalline shells. They had all come to witness this moment, the moment when humanity would finally bend the knee. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood alone at the human delegation platform. The polished metal felt cold under her hands as she gripped the railing. Around her, the noise grew louder. Alien species she had studied for years chittered, roared, sang, and broadcast their excitement through various means of communication. They were celebrating Earth's defeat. The massive display screens flickered to life, showing images that made Sarah's jaw tighten. Burning ships tumbled through the void of space, their hulls torn open like crushed tin cans. Human colony worlds sat dark and occupied, with Vrexian battle stations hovering in orbit like predatory birds. The worst image appeared last. Earth itself, beautiful and blue, surrounded by a thick ring of enemy warships. The blockade had been in place for 8 months now. No ships in, no ships out. Supreme Commander Thexlar of the Vrexian Empire rose from his seat. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished obsidian. His species had conquered 47 star systems in the last century alone. Now they had come for humanity's worlds, and by all appearances, they had succeeded. Members of the Galactic Council, Thexlar's voice boomed through the chamber, translated instantly into 1,000 languages by the Council's systems. Today marks the end of a regrettable conflict. For 3 years, the human species resisted the natural order of our galaxy. They refused peaceful integration into the Vrexian Empire. They fought with primitive weapons and desperate tactics. They cost us valuable resources and time. Sarah watched the commander as he spoke. She had studied everything about the Vrexians during the war. She knew how they thought, how they fought, how they celebrated their victories. She knew what was coming next. But today, Thexlar continued, spreading all 4 arms wide in a gesture of magnanimity. Today we offer mercy. The humans have learned their lesson. Their fleets are destroyed. Their colonies are occupied. Their homeworld is cut off from the galaxy. They can no longer resist, and so in the spirit of galactic harmony we offer them generous terms of surrender. The crowd erupted in approval. Various species made their sounds of agreement. The Thelonian delegation, tall beings made of living crystal, chimed like bells. The Korthax, bear-like creatures from a high-gravity world, stomped their feet in a thunderous rhythm. Even the pacifist Alari, who opposed all forms of warfare, seemed relieved that the conflict was ending. Sarah felt the weight of 1 billion human lives on her shoulders. Everyone back on Earth was watching this broadcast. Every human on every occupied colony world was watching. They all waited to see what she would do. Thexlar activated another display. These are our terms. First, complete disarmament. All human military vessels will be dismantled. All weapons factories will be closed. Second, annual tribute. Earth and its colonies will provide resources and manufactured goods to the Empire. The amount is negotiable, but non-payment will not be tolerated. Third, integration. Humans will become citizens of the Empire, with all the responsibilities that entails. You will fight in our wars. You will follow our laws. You will accept our governance. He paused, looking directly at Sarah. These terms are generous. We could demand much more. We could make examples of your leaders. We could turn Earth into a prison world. But we choose mercy. All you must do is sign the document, Ambassador Chen, and this war ends. Your people will live. Your world will survive. You have 1 hour to decide. The chamber fell silent. Every eye, optical sensor, and consciousness focus turned to Sarah. She stood perfectly still, her face showing nothing. Inside, her heart pounded like a war drum. One of the Galactic Council's elder members, a Zephyrite named Consul Vexnor, spoke in a gentle tone. Ambassador Chen, we understand this is difficult. But surely you can see that continued resistance is futile. Your species has fought bravely. But the time has come to accept reality. Sign the document. Save your people from further suffering. Other council members added their voices. Some spoke with genuine sympathy. Others barely hid their contempt for humanity. This young species that had dared to defy one of the galaxy's great powers. A few said nothing, simply waiting to see what would happen. Sarah took a deep breath. She thought about Earth, about the billions of people watching this moment. She thought about the colonies, about the soldiers who had died fighting impossible odds. She thought about her daughter, 12 years old, living in an underground shelter in what used to be New York City. She thought about all the things she wanted to say to these aliens who thought they had won. "May I see the document?" Sarah asked quietly. Thexelar's expression was the Vrexian equivalent of a smile. He gestured, and a holographic display appeared in front of Sarah, showing a complex legal document written in Galactic Standard. The terms were exactly as he had described. Complete surrender, total subjugation, the end of human independence. Sarah read through it slowly. She was a lawyer before the war, specialized in international treaty law. She knew exactly what this document meant. It was comprehensive, detailed, and legally binding under Galactic Council law. Once she signed it, humanity would be bound by its terms for generations. "Ambassador?" Thexelar prompted after several minutes. "Do you have questions about the terms?" Sarah looked up from the document. She looked around the chamber at all the alien species watching her. Some seemed bored now that the excitement was fading. Others leaned forward eagerly, wanting to see the humans' final humiliation. A few looked away, uncomfortable with what was happening but unwilling to intervene. "I do have a question," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Actually, I have several questions. But first, before we discuss the specific terms of this surrender, I think there's something I should explain, something important that might affect the negotiations." Thexelar made a dismissive gesture with two of his arms. "There are no negotiations, Ambassador. These are the terms. You sign or you refuse. If you refuse, the consequences will be severe." "I understand," Sarah said calmly. "But before I make that decision, I really think you should know about rule number 1. The chamber grew quiet again. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thexelar tilted his massive head, a gesture of puzzlement. "Rule number 1? What are you talking about?" Sarah smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that, on Earth, made people's survival instincts start screaming. Several species in the chamber who had similar instincts shifted uncomfortably in their seats without knowing why. "I'm talking about humanity's rules of war," Sarah said. "We have 3 basic rules that we learned over thousands of years of fighting each other. I think before you celebrate your victory, you should probably hear what they are." Thexelar leaned back in his seat, clearly amused. His officers around him made sounds that Sarah's translator identified as laughter. The Supreme Commander waved one hand dismissively. "By all means, Ambassador. Tell us about your rules. We have time for a human's final words before accepting defeat." Sarah nodded and stepped closer to the central podium. The lighting in the chamber automatically adjusted, focusing on her. She looked small compared to most of the beings present, fragile even, but her voice remained steady as she began to speak. "Humans have been fighting wars for our entire history," Sarah said. "We've fought over territory, resources, religion, ideology, and sometimes just because we didn't like each other. We've fought with rocks, with swords, with bullets, with bombs, with nuclear weapons. We've destroyed entire cities. We've killed millions of our own kind. It was brutal and terrible, and we learned a lot from it." Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably. The galaxy knew about Earth's violent history. It was one reason many had supported the Vrexian conquest. Humans were seen as dangerous, primitive, needing the guidance of more civilized species. "After thousands of years of killing each other," Sarah continued, "we finally established some basic rules, guidelines that every human military force follows, whether they're from Asia, Europe, Africa, the Americas, or anywhere else. We call them the 3 rules. They're simple, but they've kept us alive through some very dark times." Thexelar made an impatient gesture. "Get to the point, Ambassador." "Rule 3, Sarah said, holding up 3 fingers. "Never fight fair if you can avoid it. Use every advantage you have. Terrain, weather, surprise, technology. Whatever works. Honor is for poetry and speeches. Victory is for survival." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species nodded in agreement. The concept wasn't alien to them. Warfare across the galaxy often involves strategic advantages. Rule 2. Sarah lowered one finger. "Never let the enemy know your actual capabilities. Hide your strengths. Exaggerate your weaknesses. Make them think they understand you and then show them they were wrong. Information is a weapon just like any other." Thexelar's amusement was fading slightly. He exchanged glances with his tactical officers. They had fought humans for 3 years. Had they truly understood their enemy's capabilities? The evidence suggested they had. Human ships were destroyed. Human colonies were occupied. What else could there be? Sarah lowered another finger, leaving just one extended. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the species that communicated through other means seemed to pause, focusing entirely on the human ambassador. Rule number 1, Sarah said softly, but her voice carried to every corner of the massive chamber. The most important rule, the rule that has defined humanity since we first climbed down from the trees and picked up tools. The rule that kept us alive when we faced predators bigger and stronger than us. The rule that has guided us through ice ages, plagues, world wars, and every other disaster our species has endured. She paused, looking directly at Thexlar. The Supreme Commander sat forward in his seat now, no longer amused. Something in the human's tone had changed, something that his warrior instincts recognized as dangerous. Rule number 1, Sarah repeated. Never stop fighting, not ever. Not when you're losing. Not when you're outnumbered. Not when every rational analysis says you should surrender. You keep fighting until you win or until you're dead, and sometimes you keep fighting even after you're supposed to be dead. The silence stretched for several seconds. Then Thexlar laughed, a deep booming sound. But you are surrendering, Ambassador. That's why you're here. You've stopped fighting. Your military is destroyed. Sarah's smile widened. It still wasn't a friendly expression. No, Supreme Commander. We haven't stopped fighting. We haven't stopped for one single second of this war. In fact, we're fighting right now in this very moment in this very room. Confusion spread through the chamber. What was she talking about? There were no weapons here. The council chamber had the most advanced security systems in the galaxy. Nothing dangerous could enter. Sarah reached into her jacket pocket. Instantly, a dozen security systems activated. Energy shields sprang up around important council members. Vrexian guards reached for their weapons. But Sarah simply pulled out a small tablet computer, holding it up so everyone could see it. Let me show you what I mean, she said. She tapped the screen, and the chamber's main displays flickered. New images appeared, replacing the scenes of human defeat that had been showing before. The first image showed a star map of human space. Red markers indicated Vrexian-occupied systems. Blue markers indicated human-controlled systems. The council members had seen this map before. Most of human space was red. It was a visual representation of humanity's defeat. But then the map changed. New markers appeared. Green ones. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. They spread throughout the red zones like a virus spreading through a system. Each green marker represented a human military asset that the Vrexians didn't know existed. Thexlar stood up abruptly. What is this? Some kind of propaganda display? Those assets don't exist, don't they? Sarah tapped her tablet again. The images changed to show real-time footage. A Vrexian supply depot on a human colony world. The camera view was from high orbit. As they watched, explosions rippled through the facility. Ships nearby tried to respond, but more explosions disabled their engines before they could move. That's happening right now, Sarah said calmly, along with similar attacks on 347 other Vrexian military installations across occupied human space. We've been planning these strikes for 6 months. More images appeared. Vrexian officers being arrested by human resistance fighters who had somehow obtained council-certified legal authority. Vrexian ships discovering that their navigation systems had been compromised, sending them to wrong coordinates. Vrexian communications networks failing as human-designed viruses ate through their systems. This is impossible, one of Thexlar's tactical officers said. We monitor all human activity. We would have detected preparations for attacks on this scale. Sarah turned to face the officer. You monitored what we let you monitor. Remember Rule 2? Never let the enemy know your actual capabilities. For 3 years, you've been watching our decoy operations while our real forces built up in places you never thought to look. She pulled up another image. This one showed Earth's moon. The familiar gray surface looked normal at first. Then the image shifted to a different spectrum, revealing massive underground installations hidden beneath kilometers of rock. We evacuated our most important industrial facilities underground 18 months ago, Sarah explained. While you were destroying our surface factories and feeling proud of yourselves, we were building newer, better facilities where you couldn't see them. Our manufacturing capacity hasn't decreased during this war, Supreme Commander. It's increased by 400%. Thexlar's 4 hands clenched into fists. You're bluffing. If you had such capabilities, you would have used them. Would we? Sarah asked. Or would we follow our rules? Use every advantage, including the advantage of you thinking you'd already won? She tapped her tablet once more. The display showed footage from dozens of different locations. Human ships, sleek and new, emerging from asteroid bases. Human soldiers in advanced armor securing positions on colony worlds. Human defense stations coming online around Earth. Their weapons systems targeting the Vrexian blockade ships that thought they were in control. While you were celebrating your victory, Sarah said, we were preparing for the real war. The war that starts right now. The Galactic Council chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from hundreds of worlds started talking at once, their various methods of communication creating a cacophony of sound, light, and electromagnetic pulses. Security systems across the massive space activated and deactivated randomly, as different factions tried to assess the threat level. Thexelar's officers surrounded him, speaking urgently in rapid Vrexian. Sarah stood calmly at her podium, waiting for the noise to die down. She had expected this reaction. In fact, she had planned for it. Every word she had spoken so far was carefully calculated to create maximum impact. Consul Vexnor, the Zephyrite elder, raised a crystalline appendage. The chamber's systems recognized the gesture and amplified his voice, cutting through the chaos. Order. We will have order in this chamber. The noise gradually decreased. Ambassador Chen, these are serious claims. Do you have proof of what you're saying? I have more than proof, Sarah replied. She worked her tablet again. I have comprehensive documentation of everything humanity has been doing for the past 3 years. Every hidden facility, every secret shipyard, every covert operation. I'm transmitting it all to the Council's secure servers right now. You'll be able to verify every claim I've made. Thexelar's tactical officers were bent over their own devices, checking their military networks. Sarah could see the exact moment when they started receiving reports from their forces across human space. Their expressions shifted from confidence to confusion to alarm. One officer looked up at Thexelar and made a gesture that Sarah's cultural database identified as Vrexian for extreme concern. Supreme Commander, the officer said, his voice tight, we're receiving distress signals from multiple positions. The attacks she described are real. We've lost contact with 17 installations in the last 4 minutes. Another officer chimed in. Commander, I'm detecting anomalies in our fleet positioning data. Ships are reporting different locations than what our central tracking shows. It's as if someone has been feeding us false information for months. Thexelar's obsidian skin seemed to darken further. That's impossible. Our communication systems are quantum encrypted. No one can hack them. Sarah shook her head. We didn't hack them, Commander. We had help building them. Do you remember 3 years ago when you hired a human technology firm to help upgrade your fleet communications? The company was called TerraTech Solutions. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah continued, her voice matter-of-fact. TerraTech Solutions was a front company operated by Human Intelligence Services. Every piece of hardware they installed in your ships has a backdoor. Every software update they provided included our code. For 3 years we've been watching everything your fleets do. We've been feeding you false data whenever we wanted. We've been listening to every command, every tactical discussion, every strategic decision. One of the council members, a Korthax representative, spoke up. But your colonies are occupied. Your people are under Vrexian control. How could you coordinate all of this? Our colonies were never as occupied as you thought, Sarah explained. She pulled up new images. They showed what appeared to be human civilians going about their daily business on an occupied world. Then the perspective shifted, revealing that many of these civilians were actually resistance fighters. The elderly shopkeeper was a former special forces operator. The maintenance worker was a demolitions expert. The school teacher was a communications specialist. We learned a lot from our own history, Sarah said. Humans have occupied each other's territory many times. We know how occupation works, and more importantly, we know how resistance works. Every occupied colony has an underground network. They look like normal people during the day, but at night they gather intelligence, sabotage Vrexian equipment, and prepare for the counterattack. She showed more images, hidden weapons caches, underground training facilities, communications networks built into civilian infrastructure so cleverly that Vrexian scanners never detected them. On one occupied world, The human resistance had even taken over a Vrexian administrative building from the inside, replacing Vrexian staff with human operatives wearing holographic disguises. "That's not possible," Thexelar said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Our security protocols would have detected such infiltration." "Your security protocols were designed to detect external threats," Sarah replied. "They're very good at spotting ships approaching or weapons being smuggled in. But they're not designed to detect threats that grow from within. We didn't infiltrate your occupation forces, Commander. We let you occupy populations that were already organized to resist. You thought you were controlling our people. Actually, we were studying you." She brought up a detailed analysis of Vrexian military tactics, showing patterns and weaknesses that humanity had identified. "Your empire has conquered 47 systems. We studied every single one of those conquests. We analyzed your tactics, your supply chains, your command structures. We found the gaps, the inefficiencies, the assumptions you make about how conquered populations will behave." More data appeared on the screens. "You assume that once you control a planet's surface and orbital space, the population will submit. That's worked for you before because most species in the galaxy are relatively peaceful. They don't have humanity's history of constant warfare. When you conquered the Pelixians, they surrendered after you destroyed their fleet. When you took the Noran worlds, they negotiated for better terms but ultimately complied. They didn't have the cultural background to mount effective resistance." Sarah's expression hardened. "But humans do. We've been resisting occupations for thousands of years. We've perfected the art of guerrilla warfare. We know how to hide in plain sight, how to strike and fade away, how to make every day of occupation cost the occupier more than they can afford." A new image appeared showing a cost analysis. "Your occupation of human space has been expensive, hasn't it? More expensive than your other conquests. Equipment constantly breaking down, supply convoys delayed or lost, personnel requiring more rotation because of stress. You probably attributed it to human stubbornness, to the difficulty of the terrain on our worlds, to bad luck. But it was all intentional. We've been bleeding your resources this entire time." Thexler's officers were frantically working their devices now, pulling up reports and data streams. Sarah could see the realization dawning on their faces. Everything the human ambassador was saying was checking out. The anomalies in their systems, the unusual costs of the occupation, the small failures that had seemed insignificant individually but added up to something enormous. "Let me show you something else," Sarah said. She pulled up an image that made Thexelar rise from his seat again. It was a view of the Vrexian homeworld, Vrexia Prime. The beautiful world hung in space, its 3 moons visible in the background. But there was something else in the image, signatures, dozens of them. They appeared as ghostly outlines surrounding the planet. "Those are human warships," Sarah said quietly. "They've been in orbit around your homeworld for 6 months. Stealth technology. We reverse engineered it from some of your own equipment and improved it. Your sensors can't detect them. Your defense platforms don't know they're there. Those ships are carrying enough firepower to reduce your capital cities to slag." The chamber fell into shocked silence. Thexler stared at the image, his 4 hands trembling slightly. "You're bluffing." "You must be. Our defense systems are the most advanced in the sector." Sarah tapped her tablet. The view of Vrexia Prime zoomed in on one of the capital cities. The image was incredibly detailed, showing streets and buildings and crowds of Vrexians going about their daily lives. Then a green targeting reticle appeared, centered on a specific building. "That's the Imperial Palace," Sarah said. "The green marker is a targeting laser from one of our ships. Your sensors still can't see it. Would you like me to have them paint other targets? The military command center, perhaps? The main power generation facility? The water treatment plants?" "This is an act of war," one of the Vrexian officers shouted. Sarah turned to look at him. "We've been at war, officer. That's the whole point. You thought the war was over because you'd won, but we never stopped fighting. Rule number 1, remember?" She pulled up more images, showing human forces positioned near critical Vrexian infrastructure throughout their empire. Shipyards, supply depots, communication relays, fuel refineries. Everywhere the Vrexians had assumed they were secure, humanity had managed to place assets. "How?" Thexelar's voice was barely a whisper. "How did you do all of this without us knowing?" Sarah's smile returned. "Because you made assumptions about us. You assumed that because we're newer to space travel, we must be less capable. You assumed that because our ships were losing battles, we must be losing the war. You assumed that because you had more ships and more firepower, Victory was inevitable, but you forgot something important. She gestured to the images surrounding them. Humans don't fight wars the way you do. We don't line up our fleets and have honorable battles. We don't follow the rules of engagement that the rest of the galaxy considers normal. We fight to win, and we use every possible advantage to make that happen, including the advantage of making you think you'd already won. The Galactic Council chamber remained in stunned silence as the full scope of humanity's deception became clear. Representatives from worlds across the galaxy stared at the displays showing human military assets that shouldn't exist, positioned in places they shouldn't be able to reach, threatening targets that should have been completely secure. Consul Vexner was the first to speak again. Ambassador Chen, what exactly are you proposing? You've revealed that humanity has not in fact been defeated, but you still came here. You still attended this surrender ceremony. What is your intention? Sarah took a deep breath. This was the critical moment, the point where everything could either work or fall apart catastrophically. I'm here to offer terms, Consul. Not terms of our surrender, but terms for ending this war in a way that doesn't result in massive loss of life on both sides. Thexler made a harsh sound. You dare to offer us terms? After this deception? After threatening our homeworld? Yes, Sarah said simply. Because despite what you might think, humanity doesn't want to destroy the Vrexian Empire. We don't want to conquer your worlds or subjugate your people. We've been down that road in our own history, and we learned it leads nowhere good. What we want is very simple. We want to be left alone. She walked toward the center of the chamber, her movement slow and deliberate. Every eye tracked her. For 3 years, you've been trying to force us into your empire. You destroyed our ships, occupied our colonies, blockaded our homeworld. You did all of this because we refused to join you voluntarily. Well, here's the truth, Supreme Commander. We will never join your empire. We will never submit to your rule. We will fight you for 100 years if we have to. 1,000 years. However long it takes. Another image appeared on the displays. This one showed a timeline of human history, marked with conflicts. This is what we do, we fight. The longest war in human history lasted over 700 years. We had a conflict on Earth called the Cold War that lasted decades with the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. And we survived it. We've had rebellions that lasted generations. We don't stop. We can't stop. It's built into who we are as a species. She turned to face Thexler directly. So here's what I'm offering. You will withdraw all Vrexian forces from human space within 90 days. You will pay reparations for the damage caused during this war. The amount is negotiable, but it will be substantial. You will reduce your military forces by 40% and submit to independent monitoring to ensure you comply. You will sign a non-aggression treaty with humanity that will last for a minimum of 100 years. The Supreme Commander's forearms spread wide in a gesture of disbelief. And if we refuse? If we call your bluff, you cannot possibly have the forces to fight our entire empire. You're one species. We control dozens of worlds. If you refuse, Sarah said calmly, then right now in this moment, our ships will begin their attacks. The vessels around Vrexia Prime will target your capital. The operatives we have inside your military installations will activate. The viruses in your computer systems will trigger. The economic sabotage we've prepared will execute. Within 48 hours, your empire will be in chaos. Within a week, it will be fighting civil wars on multiple fronts. Within a month, it will cease to exist as a functioning government. She pulled up another display, this one showing detailed plans for each phase of the human offensive. It was comprehensive, thorough, and terrifying in its scope. We've spent 3 years preparing for this. We've thought through every possible scenario. We've prepared for every contingency. This isn't a bluff, Commander. This is a promise. If you force us to fight, we will destroy everything you've built. One of Thexelar's officers leaned close and whispered something urgent. The Supreme Commander's expression shifted, showing emotions that Sarah's cultural database struggled to identify. After a moment, he spoke again, his voice quieter than before. You said we would cease to exist within a month. That implies you have more than just military plans. Sarah nodded. We have agents positioned throughout your empire. Some are humans who infiltrated your systems. Others are members of species you've conquered who aren't happy about it. The Polyxians, for instance, remember their independence. So do the Norin, so do several other species. We've been in contact with resistance movements across your empire. If we give the signal, they'll rise up simultaneously. Your forces will be spread too thin to respond effectively. A new image appeared, showing a map of the Rexian Empire with highlighted areas indicating planned rebellions. You've been maintaining control through force and fear. That works until someone shows your subjects that you're not invincible. We'll be showing them that. Once they see Vrexian ships burning and Vrexian worlds in chaos, they'll realize they can break free. Your empire won't just lose a war with humanity, it will fragment completely. Thexler sank back into his seat. For the first time since the ceremony began, he looked uncertain. His tactical officers were gathered around him, speaking in urgent whispers. Sarah could see them reviewing data, checking reports, trying to find some flaw in her claims. But there was no flaw. Everything she had said was verifiable and true. Consul Vexnor spoke again. Ambassador Chen, these terms you've proposed, they're severe. The reduction in military forces alone would leave the Rexian Empire vulnerable to other threats. The reparations could damage their economy for decades. Are you certain this is necessary? I'm certain it's preferable to the alternative, Sarah replied. If this war continues, thousands more will die on both sides. Maybe millions. The Rexian Empire might survive, but it will be severely weakened. Humanity will survive too, but will pay a heavy price. These terms allow both sides to walk away intact. She turned to address the entire council. I want to be clear about something. Humanity is not interested in becoming a galactic power. We don't want to build an empire. We don't want to conquer other species. What we want is security. We want to know that no one can invade our space and threaten our people. These terms accomplish that goal. A representative from the Thelonian collective chimed in, their crystalline form resonating with a question. But how can we trust that humanity won't use these hidden forces for aggression later? You've demonstrated remarkable capabilities for deception and warfare. What stops you from conquering others? Sarah was ready for this question. Our own history stops us. We know what happens when one group tries to dominate others. We've done it to ourselves repeatedly, and it always ends in disaster. We've learned that lesson the hard way. What we're proposing isn't domination, it's deterrence. We want everyone to know that attacking humanity is too costly to be worth it. She pulled up one final display. This one showed a proposed new framework for relations between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Instead of conquest or subjugation, we're suggesting a different model. Mutual defense pacts between equal partners, trade agreements that benefit all parties, cultural exchanges that help us understand each other. Basically the kind of international relations that humanity developed on Earth after our last World War. Thexlar was listening now, really listening. His officers had stopped whispering and were paying attention too. Sarah could see them processing the implications of what she was saying. The Vrexian Empire could either fight a war it might not win, or it could accept terms that would fundamentally change how it operated but leave it intact. You're asking us to give up everything we've built, Thexlar said slowly. Our empire was created through strength, through conquest. You want us to abandon that? I'm asking you to evolve, Sarah corrected. Your empire was built when you were the strongest force in this sector, but you're not anymore. We've proven that. You can either adapt to this new reality or be destroyed by it. Those are the only options. She walked closer to the Vrexian delegation. Think about it, Commander. If you accept these terms, the Vrexian Empire continues to exist. Your people are safe. Your worlds remain under your control. You just have to stop trying to control everyone else's worlds too. Is that really such a terrible outcome? Thexler looked at the images surrounding them. The human warships around his homeworld. The resistance networks ready to activate. The detailed plans for his empire's destruction. Then he looked at Sarah, this small human who had somehow orchestrated all of this without him knowing. How long? He asked quietly. How long have you been planning this? Sarah smiled slightly. We started planning the day your ships entered our space, Commander. We knew we couldn't beat you in a straight fight. So we decided not to have a straight fight. We had 3 years to prepare. We used every minute of it. The Supreme Commander nodded slowly, a very human gesture that he probably didn't realize he was making. You said earlier that humans have 3 rules. But those rules are for warfare. Do you have rules for peace as well? We're still figuring those out, Sarah admitted. But we're trying. That's why I'm here offering terms instead of just attacking. We'd rather negotiate than fight. But make no mistake, Commander, if we have to fight, we will. And you'll lose. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds waited in absolute silence as Thexler considered his options. The Supreme Commander of the Vrexian Empire, conqueror of 47 star systems, sat motionless in his seat, while his officers stood around him like statues. Everyone in the chamber understood that the next few minutes would determine the fate of billions. Finally, Thexlar stood. His forearms hung at his sides, and when he spoke, his voice carried none of its earlier confidence. "I need to consult with my government. This decision is too important to make alone." "Of course," Sarah said, "but you should know that every minute you delay is a minute that our forces remain on high alert. Mistakes can happen when thousands of soldiers are ready to fire. I'd prefer to have an answer within the hour." Consul Vexnor intervened. "Perhaps we should take a formal vote. The Galactic Council can mediate these negotiations. Both parties can present their positions, and we can work toward an agreement that satisfies everyone." Thexlar made a bitter sound. "What is there to negotiate, Consul? The humans have made their position clear. We submit to their terms or they destroy us. This is not negotiation. This is extortion." Sarah shook her head. "It's not extortion, Commander. It's the reality of the situation. You invaded our space. You destroyed our property. You killed our people. Now you have to deal with the consequences. The fact that we're offering you a way out that doesn't involve your complete destruction is actually quite generous, given the circumstances." One of the council members, a Korthax named Grohl, spoke up. "The human makes a valid point. The Vrexian Empire initiated this conflict. Under galactic law, the defending party has the right to seek reparations and guarantees against future aggression." Another representative chimed in, this one from a small world called Nexus 7. "I vote to support the human terms. The Vrexian Empire has been expanding aggressively for too long. Perhaps it's time for them to learn that not every species will submit to their rule." More voices joined in. Species that had been conquered by the Vrexians, or that had watched nervously as the Empire grew closer to their own borders, saw an opportunity. If humanity could force the Vrexians to reduce their military power, the entire sector would become more stable. The balance of power would shift. Thexlar watched as support for humanity's position grew throughout the chamber. His expression darkened, but Sarah could see something else there too. Calculation. The Supreme Commander was a warrior, but he was also a survivor. He understood when a battle was lost. "Very well," Thexlar said finally. "I will present your terms to the Vrexian High Council." "But I want something in return." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You're in no position to make demands, Commander." "Perhaps not," he acknowledged. "But I'm asking anyway. I want your word, Ambassador Chen, that if we agree to these terms, humanity will abide by them as well. No secret attacks. No continued sabotage. No supporting rebellions in our territory. A genuine peace." Sarah considered this carefully. It was a reasonable request, and honestly, it was what humanity wanted anyway. "I can agree to that. If you withdraw from our space, pay the reparations, and reduce your military as specified, we'll have no reason to continue operations against you. We'll even share some of our intelligence on the resistance movements, so you can negotiate with them peacefully instead of fighting them." Thexlar's officers looked shocked at this offer. One of them started to protest, but the Supreme Commander held up a hand to silence him. "That's an unexpected concession. It's practical," Sarah explained. "Those resistance movements exist because your empire conquered their worlds by force. If you change your approach, give them more autonomy, treat them as partners instead of subjects, they'll have less reason to rebel. It's what we did on Earth eventually. Our empires all collapsed, but we're still here, stronger than ever because we learned to work together instead of dominating each other." Consul Vexnor seemed pleased with how the discussion was progressing. "Then we have the framework for an agreement. The Vrexian Empire will withdraw from human space and accept the specified terms. In return, humanity will cease all offensive operations and provide intelligence assistance. Both parties will commit to a century of peace. Does this sound acceptable?" Thexlar looked at his officers. They conferred quietly for a moment, then one of them nodded reluctantly. The Supreme Commander turned back to face the Council. "I will recommend acceptance to the High Council. But understand this, Ambassador Chen. The Vrexian people will not forget this humiliation. You've made a powerful enemy today." Sarah's expression didn't change. "No, Commander. We've made it clear that we won't be victims. There's a difference. If you want to be enemies, that's your choice. But I think you'd rather be neutral parties or maybe even friends eventually. Friends are more useful than enemies." She pulled up one more display. This one showed technological specifications, medical data, and scientific research. "Humanity has learned a lot during this war. We've made breakthroughs in stealth technology, artificial intelligence, materials science, and xenobiology. We're willing to share some of this research with the galaxy, through the Council, not the military applications but the civilian ones. Medical technology that could help dozens of species, energy systems that are more efficient than what most of you use, manufacturing techniques that could improve your economies. The mood in the chamber shifted again. If humanity was offering technology sharing, that changed everything. Species that might have been neutral or even sympathetic to the Vrexians suddenly had a reason to support the human position. A representative from the Ilari, the pacifist species, spoke up. This is most encouraging, Ambassador Chen. If humanity is willing to share knowledge for the benefit of all species, then perhaps this conflict can lead to positive outcomes for everyone. Sarah nodded. That's our hope. We didn't want this war. We just wanted to be left alone to develop at our own pace. But since you forced us to accelerate our development, we might as well share the benefits. Thexlar made a sound of disgust. You've thought of everything, haven't you? You've positioned yourselves as the victims, the heroes, and the benefactors all at once. The Council will vote in your favor, and the Vrexian Empire will be forced to accept terms that we would never have agreed to under normal circumstances. That's what Rule 2 means, Commander, Sarah said. Never let the enemy know your actual capabilities. We let you think you were winning while we prepared the real strategy. We let you think we were desperate while we built up overwhelming advantages. And now we're letting you save face by accepting terms that keep your empire intact while ensuring you can't threaten us again. She walked closer to the Vrexian delegation one last time. You could have done this differently, you know. When you first contacted humanity, you could have offered trade and cooperation. We would have accepted. We wanted friends in the galaxy. But instead you demanded submission. You invaded when we refused. You forced us to show you what we're really capable of. Sarah gestured to all the displays still showing human military assets, resistance networks, and technological advantages. This is what happens when you back humans into a corner. We don't curl up and die. We don't surrender quietly. We fight with everything we have, and we use every dirty trick we can think of because that's how we survived on a planet full of predators for millions of years. That's how we survived each other for thousands of years, and that's how we'll survive anyone who threatens us. She turned to address the entire council one last time. I'm calling for a vote. All those in favor of the proposed terms for ending the human-Vrexian conflict, please indicate now. Consul Vexnor began the formal voting process. One by one, representatives indicated their positions. The count was overwhelming. Nearly 90% of the council voted to accept the human terms. Only a few species allied with the Vrexians voted against, and even some of those seemed reluctant. The vote is decisive, Vexnor announced. The Galactic Council accepts the proposed terms. Supreme Commander Thexlar, do you accept the will of the Council? Thexlar stood in silence for a long moment. Sarah could see the war of emotions on his face, alien as his features were. Pride, anger, humiliation, but also relief. He was a warrior who had lost a battle, but he was also a leader responsible for billions of lives. He knew the right choice. The Vrexian Empire accepts the terms, he said finally. We will begin withdrawal from human space immediately. The reparations and military reductions will be negotiated over the coming weeks, but we commit to fulfilling our obligations under this agreement. The chamber erupted in a mix of reactions. Some species cheered at the peaceful resolution. Others murmured in shock that the mighty Vrexian Empire had been forced to back down. A few stayed silent, processing what this meant for the balance of power in the galaxy. Sarah felt the tension drain from her body. It was done. 3 years of war, 3 years of deception and planning, and it was finally over. Humanity had won, not by destroying their enemy, but by convincing them that destruction was the alternative to peace. As the council session began to break up, Thexlar approached Sarah's podium.